Welcome to Leading Beyond Limits, the podcast where we explore the extraordinary journeys and insights of remarkable leaders who have pushed the boundaries of what's possible. Your host, Angel Radcliffe, who is a digital transformation leader, author, speaker, and financial educator, will lead each episode and dive deep into the stories, strategies, and philosophies that have empowered these exceptional individuals to lead, inspire, and achieve beyond the ordinary. We're about to embark on a journey of discovery and inspiration, and together, we'll learn what it takes to lead beyond limits. So grab your cape, or at least your favorite coffee mug, because we're about to unravel the extraordinary tales of trailblazers who've turned impossible into I'm possible. Let's get started.
On today's show, we're welcoming Regina Huber, a transformational leadership coach, international speaker, and author. Regina is on a mission to drive bold, value-driven, and heart-centered leadership conversations. So tune in as we discuss leadership presence and how you can build what you need in making that lasting impression in your leadership journey. Regina, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on, Angel. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I am delighted to chat with you today.
And I'm excited about us to dig into the topic of leadership presence because everyone wants to be a leader and so many people want to be successful at it. And sometimes they're just missing all the pieces to the puzzle. So I'm sure you're going to bring a wealth of experience to the topic. I am so looking forward to having the discussion. And I know you do a multitude of things. You're a speaker, you're an author, you're a coach. Let us know how you got into everything that you're doing today.
Yes, and I'm going to keep it as short as possible because it's a pretty eclectic and long story. And what happened before I started this business was I lived in Brazil before I moved to New York City. And before that, I lived in Argentina. So I had a business in both countries already. This is not my first business. But before I was a business owner, I was also an employee, right? And I was a leader and manager as an employee at the Boston Consulting Group in several different locations. That, of course, gave me a lot of knowledge and experience for our topic today, which is leadership, of course, because it's the main topic of the overarching topic of your podcast. And then, of course, I added on some different leadership experience through those businesses in Argentina and Brazil. Now, in Argentina, everything went great. In Brazil, not so much. I had a problem with a fraudulent business partner, and that's what eventually had me move again to a different country and start from scratch. And back then, I tried to figure out how to fit it all together, all this eclectic experience. I also had had studied quite a few holistic modalities in the past, and I wanted to fit it all into that unique package that I wanted to offer to people as value. Yes. And as I was figuring out what that could be, that's when Transform Your Performance was born. But it wasn't born, of course, from one day to the next. It was a process. I started networking. I started gaining clarity. I started talking to people and what they needed. And so eventually I realized that I could provide the greatest value to leaders in corporate, in professional services, and also some business owners. But most of my clients are really leaders who work in corporate. And most of them are women nowadays, although not all. I currently mostly work with leaders who want to level up their leadership skills, but also their own career. So I help them reach their next career goal, help them get a promotion faster than they would on their own oftentimes. And my clients value my very holistic approach to coaching because of this very eclectic experience. And because usually you also work with clients, Angel, and clients don't just want a promotion or a raise or a better job. They also want to up-level their leadership skills. They want to have a better experience with their jobs. They want more fulfillment. They want to make an impact for their teams. They want all these different things, and they really want to thrive as leaders, not just in their careers, but also in the way they feel about it and in their overall life. Oftentimes, we actually talk about much more than just the career itself.
It sounds like a very exciting journey, and you hit on so many points. I can see why you may be passionate about this topic and helping people with their leadership journey and having that transformative experience. One thing that you just said is how leaders they want to thrive, they want to be successful, and so many times I have these conversations with my colleagues and people want to advance and they want to advance so quickly that they're forgetting the skills they need to be a leader. And I think soft skills are very essential when you are in any leadership role and understanding how do you communicate and work with your team and working on your EQ along with that overall presence, leadership presence. And before we get any deeper, I just want to establish some foundational knowledge for the audience that's listening in. Regina, I'd like for you to share with us, and this is, of course, from your viewpoint, what does it mean for a leader to have a strong presence? And then why is it important?
Yes, first of all, we all define presence a bit differently, I think, because there's so much that flows into it. It's really hard to delineate where it starts and where it ends, right? Presence is about how you show up and how you are perceived. I think that is the general description of what it is. And then what flows into it is really your attitude. Of course, also your appearance, your outfit, all of that too. But it's not the only thing, right? It's your attitude, as I said before, your behavior, your words, your energy. And oftentimes we forget about energy. It's what you bring as who you are. Are you transparent? Are you authentic? We talk so much about authenticity these days, but what does that really mean? It means that we can trust you. It means that we can trust you. Why? Because we know what you're about. We know what you stand for. And that's what we want to see in a leader. We want to hear it, but we also want to see it. It's not just about the words, it's about the actions. And one thing that I want to come back to again, it's also about the energy. This is something that we don't talk about a lot in business. And I don't really know why, because it's so key. Your energy flows into everything you think, into everything you say, and into everything you do. It flows into your behavior, your attitude, your body language, your words, anything you can imagine. And yet we hardly talk about it. When I was asked to write an article for the corporate magazine a few years ago, that was was now, I think, and they wanted me to write about executive presence, I put my main focus on energy because a lot of people talk about the other components, but I think the energy is really that piece that we forget about. And when we optimize our energy before we go into meetings, before we speak to our team, before we go into a negotiation, whatever the situation is, and especially when it's a challenging situation, when we know how to optimize that energy, then it can make all the difference. So if you go, for example, into a negotiation and your energy is off, then it's much harder to close the deal. Is energy so important? Oftentimes we hear, and you've probably heard that before too, and a lot of our listeners may have heard it, that it takes 7 seconds to make a first impression. When in reality, it takes only 0.07 seconds. I'm going to say that again, 0.07 seconds for our brains to figure out whether we can trust someone. Why is that so fast? Because it's part of our survival mechanism. So your energy speaks faster than your words. And in most instances, it also speaks louder than your words. Because when your words are, or also your body language, any of the two, when they are not aligned with your energy, the energy you transmit, then your energy is what usually wins. It basically discloses the truth to your listeners, right? Or to your viewers, whatever the situation is. And it's really important to remember that. It's so quick. Energy is even already transmitted before we say a single word. So if you go into your meeting and you haven't said anything, you already communicated. You're already communicating through your energy. Of course, also through your body language and through your appearance. But even if you're not there yet and you're just walking to your meeting room, you're already communicating energy, whether you are aware of that or not. And of course, the other people might not be consciously aware of it either. However, they pick it up subconsciously. And I think that's something important to remember.
Such great information that you shared. And I'm so glad that you touched on body language. I was sitting here thinking, you walk into a room, think about you just had a really bad day. Maybe you had a bad meeting with a client and now you're in your next meeting and everything from your previous meeting is rolling into your next, like showing in your energy, your facial expression, the way that you're presenting yourself, your body language. And I think energy is super important as well in presence. And I think a huge part of that, of understanding your energy, is being self aware. So many people are not self aware of how they're being perceived or how they're showing up. Regina, just from your coaching experience, I'd like to know if you've worked with anyone, particularly with changing how they're self-aware, changing how they show up in a room, and what impact it's had on their leadership journey.
Absolutely. First of all, yes, self-awareness is, of course, the basis for self-leadership. And self-leadership, to me, is the most essential leadership trait of all. Once we know how to lead ourselves, that's when we can start leading others or organizations, right? Communities, teams. Without self-awareness, there's no self-leadership. And without self-leadership, there's no successful, or at least not sustainably effective leadership. So, yes, we can manage our energy as we become more self-aware. And part of it is also getting feedback, of course. We want to test sometimes how we are perceived. We can ask people that we trust how we are perceived, right? Or we could, for example, videotape ourselves. Speakers do that. They videotape themselves and they find out a lot of interesting little details about, about themselves when they watch the video, because, of course, we don't see our gestures and our energy. We don't see our facial gestures, at least, right? And our energy flows into those gestures. So now that we can see ourselves, when we record ourselves, we can learn a lot about what they really look like. What are we conveying? What are we transmitting to the people around us? Now, of course, when we ask other people, that's usually the most valuable feedback, as long as there's mutual trust. Because if there's no mutual trust, then we're not going to get an honest answer, and maybe even no answer. And we will also maybe be a little bit more in the defensive. So there has to be a really high trust level. One such relationship could be a coach and her or his client, right? Now, there are tools, and some of them I have also put into my book, Speak Up, Stand Out, and Shine, which helps people prepare for speaking situations of any kind. And one of those tools that I share in that book, I call it Tap into Your Inner Power. And that has a lot to do with your inner energy and with optimizing your energy for, let's say, meetings, negotiations, job interviews, whatever it is for everybody. And in this way, some of my clients have prepared for meetings. I have one particular client comes to mind. She was challenged by somebody who would talk over her in meetings quite a bit and also take her ideas. And I know this sometimes sounds a little bit like a cliche, but it does happen. We hear it a lot, right? It does happen. And now she started preparing energetically for this, for the next meeting. And it changed everything for her. Of course, yes, we also worked on language to use and when it happened and all of that. Yes, we did. But the way she stepped into that meeting, she told me afterward, Regina, I knew that this meeting was going to be different because she felt different. And what that does, it doesn't only raise our own confidence, it also enhances our presence, our perceived presence when we do those exercises. And it's a very simple exercise where you simply sit and take a moment to go inside and to feel your inner power. And for me, that's easiest to feel in the solar plexus area. So I try to really focus on that area and breathe into it and then spread that energy through my body and around me. And such a simple exercise can make a huge difference for people. Of course, you should do an exercise that speaks to you. If this is not something that you can relate to, maybe do something different, right? But this is actually, it has become one of my favorite exercises before, let's say, I go speak at a conference or at some other place where maybe I'm a little nervous, because even though we have done this oftentimes, there are always nerves involved. And so I still use my own tools that I put into my book. I use them, or I needed them much more in the past. And this is also why I came up with those tools in the first place. But I still use them to this date.
Wow. And Regina, you hit something. You talked about recording yourself and watching your gestures. And I recommend that to people as well, especially when they're working on their pitch. But let's think about someone who I know a lot of people talk with their hands, and that's sometimes frowned upon, especially in a corporate space or when you're dealing with clients or someone who is not really mindful of their body language. And let's say they've been recording themselves, they've been practicing, and now they show up in the meeting and maybe they're too stiff. Maybe people feel like they're not being authentic or they're not showing emotion. I know there's so many people who get really good at and it's okay. You don't know how they feel about something because they're never going to let it show. So, how can you practice those techniques on how leaders can really maintain an authentic presence while still trying to adapt to working with their different audiences?
Yes, this is an amazing question. I always say to people, do not use canned body language ever. It should feel natural. Now, we sometimes do things that we are not aware of that can be distracting. I'm going to give you my own example. When I started speaking in front of an audience, in front of a room or on a stage, I used to move a lot because I'm a movement person. I love to dance. I love to walk. I have moved, I don't know, 35 times in my life from one place to the other, even more than that. I counted, I stopped counting at 35, I think. So I'm about movement. That's me. And I also want to keep that, Angel. However, when it's too much movement, then it's distracting. Then people do not hear anymore what I want to share with them. They no longer hear my words. So I had to tone it down a little bit. And the same is true of hand movements. Keep your hand movements. It's part of who you are, but maybe if it's too much because it's too distracting, then just tone it down a little bit. That would be my advice, because I really don't recommend to people to totally change their body language or to copy somebody else's body language, because that will just never feel authentic, and it will feel like it's not congruent with what you're sharing, with who you are. So I get where the question is coming from, but also I had this talk, Angel, in the past when I went into financial service companies, because my business is based in New York City and I did a lot of networking in New York City. I used to speak at banks primarily. And once one of the ladies said to me, she came up to me after and said, I love that you came with a grass green blouse on. I really admire that. And you know what? I was actually talking about, and not only about this, but also about standing out with your unique brilliance. And I believe that it's not about showing up in maybe something that is not adequate for a work environment. And my outfit totally was adequate, by the way. but it's, but you don't always have to show up in a gray suit every single day, right? Just because you work in financial services, and gladly that's also changing. What I want to say is if a gray suit does not go with your personality at all, then wear something that does. You can still be aligned with the dress code. And this is very similar to the body language we talked about earlier. It is about authenticity. And in that talk, I also talked about, I remember that clearly. I talked about how it is okay to wear that red dress or that green blouse or whatever it is, even when most people around you maybe show up in dark blue and gray. Does that answer your question, Angel?
It does. Thank you so much. And I want to go straight to the opposite because we were
Mhm.
discussing how leaders can show up and still be their authentic selves. And when you look at the other end of the spectrum, when you have really gained control over mastering your presence, there are some people who may think that confidence is coming off as a bit arrogant or intimidating. So, what ways would you suggest that you can still be confident without coming across as arrogant or intimidating?
Yes. There's a difference between confidence and overconfidence. I believe true confidence actually usually does not easily come across as arrogance because it is still authentic. And true confidence is rooted in knowing who you are and knowing your unique brilliance and value and showing up as your best self, in having the courage and the boldness and the audacity to show your brilliance, right? I always say you gotta know, own, and show your brilliance, not just as a leader, but just in general to be successful. Then there's overconfidence. Overconfidence is when it's a little bit hard to define, but I would define it as confidence goes a little bit over the limit in terms of you're too confident of the quality of your work. It's not really congruent, it's not aligned. And then that's where the arrogance comes in because you no longer are aware. Self awareness comes in again, Angel. So we're no longer aware of where we really are with the quality of our work, where we need to potentially improve skills. So I think that's where people become arrogant when they think, oh, I've outgrown everything and I have no more need to grow. I have, I know everything. I don't think that genuinely confident people easily come across as arrogant because oftentimes arrogance is actually rooted in insecurity.
That is absolutely true. So I wholeheartedly agree. And one of the things that I was just sitting here thinking about is earlier in my career, when had my first corporate job, I was still in college. And I remember going to work dressed up every day in a suit. I was working in customer service. Don't ask why I was
Mhm.
wearing a suit. But
Yeah.
my mom always told me that you are supposed to dress for the job you want, not the job you have. Always think with the bigger picture in mind. And I remember going to work and people would always ask me, like, why are you so dressed up? This is a call center job where this job doesn't really pay enough money for you to be dressing like the way you're dressing. And I think sometimes that probably came off as being a bit arrogant or maybe intimidating. And as I grew in my career, I still dress the same to this day, 16 years later. And one of the things that I was thinking about is even with my mentees and people that I manage now, I always tell them, you should walk into the room, you should own it. I feel as though When you learn to master that executive presence and that overall leadership presence, you are able to thoroughly communicate your vision and values through your presence. You're able to build influence. People will listen to you. You see someone that's dressed well, and I know this sounds insane, but if you see someone walk into a room and they are very well put together, you're more likely to listen to what they have to say. And
Yes,
that
it's psychological.
it is, and it's so sad that our society is that way.
Your mother is a wise lady.
Thank
I
you.
have to say that because she told you, she taught you through what she said. I think she taught you to not dim your own light just because other people are intimidated. That is actually something they might need to work on. Yes. And yes, you're absolutely right. You show up with the attitude and the outfit maybe of the role you want, and it just makes it easier.
It does, and I've had some
Mhm.
great experiences. Even now, I work in technology. It's
Yeah.
male dominated. Most people will come to work when we have to do those long hours and go live projects, and people in their sweatshirt and jeans know I'm going dressed up. I try to instill that into many of my mentees, but
Okay.
well, take it with a grain of salt. People can do what they want. Regina, what I want to do right now is I'd like to take a few minutes and I want to play a game of this or that as it relates to leadership presence. I'll share 2 words and you just give an answer. It's this or that. You share which one. And I think this will be fun. And if you want to give insight to why you're choosing which response, I think that would help some of the listeners as well gain clarity around presence. Are you up for this game?
I am.
This
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
but this is the first time that I'm actually doing this game.
Mhm.
Who knows? It may become a thing for the show. So you let me know when you're ready.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay. All right, the first one is, let's say you have a choice between confidence or charisma.
Charisma. I chose charisma simply because I thought maybe if you want to talk about that too, then because we already talked about confidence, and I said I'm going to take the challenge because I definitely prefer actually confidence in people, just because charisma can sometimes be a bit more manipulative, but that's a whole other big conversation, and we could agree or disagree on that.
Authority or approachability,
Approachability,
poise or passion,
passion.
communication skills or listening skills.
Okay, I take communication skills because it includes listening skills.
Ah, look at that. Attention or respect.
Respect also almost includes attention, I believe, although not automatically, but I would say when you respect somebody, you give them attention.
Okay, okay. Let's see. Self assurance or humbleness.
That's another difficult one because I think humbleness is often misinterpreted as holding back, and that's not really what it is. So I'm going to go with humbleness in the good sense of knowing that we don't know everything.
Okay, that's a good one. Clarity or conviction.
Clarity.
Okay. So that was fun. I think it's something different. And I think everyone
Mhm.
has their own reasoning for choosing certain responses. I know you, of course, shared some insights as to why you were choosing some, but when you think about that clarity or conviction, why are you choosing clarity?
Because conviction is built on beliefs, and we gain clarity when we question our beliefs and our convictions.
Perfect response. And Regina, I'm glad to have had you on the show. I know we're almost out of time. I just have a few more questions to
Sure.
ask you and any insights that you can give us. We talked so much about presence. We talked about being authentic and practicing how you show up and watching your energy and your behaviors and you shared so much information, but are there any specific techniques or exercises that leaders can practice to strengthen their presence aside from, of course, like recording themselves? And is there something that you've come up with or framework that you can share?
Yes. First of all, I talked about the energy tool. That is a very simple one. There are also some other tools in my book, Speak Up, Stand Out, and Shine, that we can use. And some of them are more mindset related tools, because as we said, presence is a conglomerate or a composition of all these different elements. So the mindset also flows into it. In one of my frameworks, my leadership frameworks, I talk about a self-empowering mindset and heart set. This particular framework is called Powerful Leadership Transformation, and it has 4 pillars. And one of them is this self-empowering mindset and heart set. The second one is distinctive uniqueness. So that also flows into our presence. How are we distinctively unique? This includes both our brilliance and also, on the other hand, being able to admit that we are not perfect also flows into our presence, I believe. And then the third pillar is a body and energy conscious presence. We talked about that more extensively already. And then, of course, the fourth pillar is effective and inspired action. But coming back to presence, because it is a combination of all these different things, I think we also need to approach it from different angles, right? So what is my mindset? What do I stand for? How does that shine through me? How to see people that in me when I talk, when I work with my team, for example, right? Because a lot of times we see leaders who talk about really nice values and they say they are value driven, and we cannot really see it in their behavior when they work with their team. So we want to really have that congruence in everything that is a part of that leadership presence. I think we want to work on all these different aspects at the same time and not necessarily separately.
That's very true. And a lot of the things that we've talked about today, someone may be listening and they may not agree. I always say people do what they want on their journey. We're here to share our advice, our expertise, and guide people. But of course, at the end of the day, people will make their own decisions. Someone may say, I don't think presence is needed to be a leader. And there are so many misconceptions about leadership presence. How can leaders overcome those misconceptions?
It's best done by testing it. If you know that what you do is effective and it's effective sustainably in the long term, then keep doing it. Keep doing it. If you're happy with it, if your team is happy with that behavior that you display with them and with other people, then why not, right? I believe that leadership has different faces. We see that all the time. There are many different leadership styles. There are different personality types. So we have leaders who are very extroverted. We have leaders who are very introverted. And it's all valuable as long as they they really display behavior that is good for the people around them, and as long as they have the best interests of the people they lead in mind, as long as the intention is right, and together with the intention, they also they I believe leaders have the responsibility to be informed. So they cannot just be informed from one source, because that's very dangerous. Leaders have to not just have the intention, but also the knowledge, so that they can combine both, and they don't run a risk of going in the wrong direction with something. And we see that a lot. It becomes more and more clear in our times now, when there's so much polarity, and we have some leaders, especially also in politics or in communities, just go blindly in one direction instead of considering all the different possibilities and all the information that's out there. And of course, we don't know sometimes whether it's really true, but we have to really inform ourselves from different sources as leaders, I believe.
I believe that as well. Thank you so much. And so much information here. We're definitely going to have you on another episode because I can keep talking to you on and on about this topic. Every time that you give a response, I think of an entire new question.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about when it comes to leadership.
It is. And Regina, I just want to extend my sincere gratitude for you taking your time to join us. You are Calling in all the way from France. I know it's late there, and I know we've been talking for almost an hour now. You've given such great insights around leadership, and I can tell that you are passionate around the work that you're doing. I know you've co authored a few books, and where can our listeners find those books online?
Yes, my book, Speak Up, Stand Out, and Shine, is on Amazon. As I said earlier, it's all about how to prepare mentally, physically, and energetically for challenging situations such as presentations, for example, or meetings. I co-authored some other books, The Art of Connection. I was a co-author there twice in 2 years, and it's also on Amazon. There's another book that is called Mentors. It is on Amazon as well. It's also, all these books are also on my website, transformyourperformance.com. You have them all lined up. And that is also my website. I'm on LinkedIn as Regina Huber. I'm also on YouTube as Regina Huber. I have my LinkedIn Career Growth Strategies newsletter where I write about career growth, and I provide tips around career growth, career advancement, but also leadership at the same time.
Awesome. And we will post all of those links in the show notes. And I know this is a sad ending, but we would definitely welcome you back down the road and hope that you would definitely join us. But before we get out of here today, Regina, I would like for you to share with us one piece of advice that's been instrumental in your journey that you can pass on to an emerging leader or current leader.
Yes, I like to say this: leaders don't blend in, leaders stand out. And in order to stand out and distinguish ourselves in the way we want to distinguish ourselves, because we don't just want to stand out with something negative, right? In order to stand out in the way we want to stand out, to be seen as the value-driven, bold, or visionary leaders we are, we must be able to show our value and our unique brilliance. So that is a very important clarity-finding process for any leader, because you can only show it if you know it and you own it. To really go deep with this process of exploring your potential. There's a lot more in it still than you would probably think right now. And the deeper you go into it, the deeper you step into your potential, the more it expands.
Thank you for tuning into another inspiring episode of Leading Beyond Limits. If you enjoyed today's conversation and want to hear more from our incredible guests, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback means the world to us. And if you have a remarkable leader in mind who you'd like to hear on our show, or any questions and comments, feel free to reach out to us. You can find our contact information in the show notes. Remember, leadership knows no bounds, and with the right insights and determination, you too can lead beyond limits. Until next time, keep reaching for the stars and leading with purpose.